Hello viewers, today we are going to learn about ex situ conservation. Before learning the ex situ conservation, we need to know about the biodiversity conservation as well. The biodiversity conservation, the conservation means protection. That means protection of species of biological communities in sufficient numbers and sufficiently large areas for the maintenance of their natural communities and ecological structures. Biodiversity conservation is mainly classified into in situ biodiversity conservation and ex situ biodiversity conservation. In situ biodiversity conservation itself shows that natural homes, that means the conservation of animal as well as plant species in natural homes. For example, wildlife sanctuaries are there, national parks are there, as well as biosphere reserves are there for in situ biodiversity conservation. Today we are going to discuss in detail about ex situ biodiversity conservation. Ex situ biodiversity conservation is the conservation of biodiversity by the artificial homes. For example, zoos, botanical gardens, aquaria, seed banks, gene bank, cryopreservation, some of the examples for the ex situ biodiversity conservation. We all know that India is 7th mega biodiversity conservation species, whereas in spite of this a large biodiversity in India, there is a depletion in the biodiversity species. For that, we have to conserve the biodiversity population in India. Today we are going to discuss about ex situ conservation. Ex situ conservation itself shows that the conservation of off-site species, that means the area of conservation is away from the natural home. In other way, we can say that protecting from natural homes to artificial homes, targeting all levels of biodiversity such as genetic, speciation as well as the ecosystem. In other words, we can say that whatever it is the wildlife species to be protected, that has to collect from the natural habitat and keep them in a safer area under the security of man. The ex situ conservation is again approaches are two types. One is traditional method, the other one is scientific methods. In traditional methods, there are zoo as well as the establishment of botanical gardens as well as the arranging the aquaria. In these three methods, we can conserve the biodiversity in ex situ way. The other one is scientific methods. First of all, we have to look into how the traditional methods undergo the biodiversity conservation. For example, in zoo as well as botanical gardens, the animal as well as plant species are isolated from their natural habitat and keep them under the botanical specialist or biologists to watch or to conserve them. So, first of all, we have to understand that why we require zoo. The mandate of the zoo is to sustain their own population and augment the depleted population. The main aim as well as principle of the zoo is protection of components of biological diversity outside their natural habitat and provides opportunities for research on components of biological diversity and forefront of educating public. So, here first we have to understand that zoological garden conservation strategy. We all know that zoos are only for the recreation purpose, but there is a lot more to know about zoo conservation. For that, there are some strategies to conserve the biodiversity. Awareness to establish a new balance between human development and the earth's biological system is basis to the conservation. The second strategy is this awareness should grow in all countries of the world and in all levels of human society and should be the basis for the political decisions to improve. And for this there is a media that have been adopted by the zoo is that is a education media. So explaining the irreplaceable value of the entire biological system of our planet and all of its constitutional components is the most powerful tool in raising the level of general awareness. Next we will come into the education strategy. There are 8 education strategies are there. First education strategy is education is compatible with recreation. So here we can explain that people go to the zoos during their free time and of their own free will indicates that they are interested to know and learn about animals, which means it is clearly indicating that they are susceptible to education in their own leisure time. And the second strategy is the formal education. Formal education as well as intensive education for selected groups. This strategy mainly teaches formal zoo education comprises education that is conducted in the framework of the curriculum of educational institutions, just like conventional schooling system or conventional education system. And the third strategy is education should be conducted at various levels. In this, the basic level of zoo education is simply the display of living animals. With this, they will come to know about the wild animals and education campaigns, and different approaches are also required to motivate the general public. And the next strategy is variety of biological themes will be explained. The exhibition of animals in zoos provides the foundation for biological themes like morphology, geographical distribution and anatomical and physiological adaptations to the environment. And the next strategy is conservation education. Basic form of conservation education is to informing the public about threatened status of the species of zoo animals which are taxonomically and geographically related. The other one, everybody aware of that, the global zoo network. It is one of the most important tool as well as strategy for spreading the information about the animals that live in diverse biotopes and ecosystems in different parts of the world. The other one is research and conservation of endangered species. Research is always associated with the conservation of endangered species. Both can demonstrate clearly to the public that no cost or effort is required to conserve natural creatures. And the final strategy is educational techniques used by zoos. Zoo education is not just the display of animals. They accumulated experience and developed techniques like exhibiting the design, furnishing enclosures, creation of illusions, legible signs, audio-visual tools, computer simulations and keeper talks, etc. So these are the 8 strategies of education adopted by the zoo. Next is the zoos, the animals which are conserved by the zoo are mainly by the captive breeding methodology. What is meant by captive breeding? That means these species have already reached the point. That means some endangered species, first we have to identify where their population would not recover in the wild. That species have to be brought into the zoos under the safer area for captive breeding of endangered species. This is the last option for the conservation of the animals. It works well for species that are easily bred in captivity, but more specialized animals are difficult to keep. Isolated in captivity, that means they do not evolve with their natural environment. First we will see what is the role of zoo. That is, main role is supplement the population in the wild. In captivity, we are seeing here in the photograph, that is the Asiatic lion. Everybody knows, everybody aware of this animal. This is mainly confined to the Gir forest. In other areas it cannot survive. but now the number of this species is below 150 only because of the endemic diseases. So, once the forest area, any zoo, any forest area, if any kind of epidemic disease occurs in a particular forest, the population will be completely wiped out. Then the zoo plays a major role in ex situ conserving for educating the people for research purpose as well as for the conservation point of view. And in ex situ conservation, the one more concept is highly required, that is the social hierarchy. We all know that there are social animals are there and some other animals are there. In social animal, for example, the lion is a social animal. So here the social hierarchy has to be taken care of. That means there in animal population, in animal community, alpha male, alpha female, beta male, beta female, adults, young ones like groups are there. To survive in that conservation field, one has to understand the psychology of the animals also. So, we have to follow before conserving in ex situ conditions, we have to understand the social hierarchy as well as the study of the animal psychology. According to the action 4.2 of caring for the earth, the biological diversity conservation in ex situ in collaboration with in situ, then only we will get more result in the conservation area. Next we will move on to the other success story of the captive breeding, that is the lion-tailed macaw, that is the Kalakadu sanctuary. It is existing. But in Tamil Nadu government as well as in collaboration with the Indian government has been encouraged to collaboration with the San Diego Zoo in America and for the captive breeding program. So, for the viable population of lion-tailed macaw, which is an endangered species. The other captive breeding success story is Pierre David's deer. It is a native species of China. In 1865, 18 were taken into zoological collections. Meanwhile, it became extinct in the wild. By 1981, there were 994 individuals scattered through zoological collections. By 2015, 700 are released into the wild. This is a success story of the captive breeding. And other success story is Nilgiri langur. It is an endemic species. By captive breeding, most of them, more than 200 Nilgiri langurs have been released into the wild. And other success story of the captive breeding is, and most important one is California condor. It is found in western and southern US, now in captivity as a strategy for species survival. Here in this photograph we are showing that condor hand puppet that feeds chick, so it imprints on birds, not humans. In that way also we can taken care by the captive breeding. From 22 to now it is 289 individuals now breeding in the wild again. That means because of the captive breeding, 22 to 289 species have been raised and then released into the wild. The other success story of this captive breeding is Grand Cayman Blue Iguana. This is from the Cayman Islands. In 2004, just imagine, only 4 individuals remained in wild. But because of the recovery programs like captive breeding, head starting, reintroductions as well as in situ conservation, 200 individuals have been released into the wild. But the target is 1000. We can achieve the target, but there is no wild habitat for protecting them. So that is a major limitation for that. And another zoo success stories which are in the world are Zawalski's wild horse and Mauritius kestrel, Hawaiian goose, European bison as well as Arabian oryx. All these we have studied in history, but now they were conserved only by the captive breeding program. Now we will see that zoo success stories in India. The India we all aware of crocodiles. So National Crocodile Conservation Project taken up by the Government of India and survived the endangered species of gharial variety, saltwater crocodiles as well as the mugger type crocodiles. The other success stories of India, that is a red panda and a snow leopard from the Darjeeling Zoo, as well as pygmy hog, as well as brow antlered deer. All these are survived as well as conserved and released into the wild through the captive breeding programs. And some recent extincts in the wild, these two species are there, they have extincted completely. That is a golden frog native to Panama, extinct in wild in 2007. But because of the captive breeding, survivors of last known population captured for captive breeding, now they are raising in zoos. The other one is Spix macaw. It is native to central Brazil, presumed extinct in wild in 2000, but it is survived by through the captive breeding program. And these are some of the methods in extinct ex situ conservation methods. One is cross fostering methods, which are used for the eagles, and artificial incubation for the sea turtles as well as pandas, and embryo transfer method followed for the Zolsky hearts, as well as frozen zoos are for the seed as well as the gene conservations. These are the overall methods which are adopted by the ex situ conservation by zoos. And next conservative methodology is botanical gardens. We all know that botanical gardens, many of us visited botanical gardens only for the recreation purpose. So many of us are not aware of the motto behind the biological gardens, botanical gardens. So there are estimated to be around 1600 botanical gardens throughout the world, and these receive over 150 million visitors per year. The Botanical Gardens Conservation Institute was set up in 1987, and its role is to collect and make available information on plant conservation. They are used to grow and display plants primarily for scientific and educational purposes like herbariums, lecture rooms, laboratories, libraries, museums, and experimental or research plantings. They are also useful for different services for sectors that utilize and conserve plant diversity like agriculture, forestry, pharmaceutical and biofuel industries, protected area management as well as the ecotourism. And they also play a great role in attaining target of the global strategy for plant conservation for 2020 to cultivate 75% of the world's threatened plant species in ex situ. Now we will see the role of the botanical gardens. How can we select the plants or endangered species from the plant kingdom? So there are 5 categories are there to identify. That means rare and endangered species are suitable for this botanical gardens, and economically important plants are there, and species that are needed for the restoration of an ecosystem, and keystone species are there, and taxonomically isolated species are available. So we have to identify first of all on their biological importance, and after identification then we have to select from them. The selection factors are extinction risk, suitability of plant for ex situ conservation, value of plant as well as plant products, and ease of collection, the procedures and funds available, because all the methods are highly expensive, and chances for this success also we have to see before collecting the samples from the wild. And some of the programs which are useful for the plant, just like captive breeding in animals, these are reintroduction program. That means that every species, all species which are to be protected are gone, completely damaged. So we have to reintroduce by these botanical gardens. And the second one is augmentation program, that is still there, that means in limited number, but more we have to add it. And the third is the introduction, that is never there, but we are adding new species by hybridization. For conservation purposes, that is a rare species which are medicinally important, as well as important for mankind, that is the translocations, and for the other purpose, that is the exotic species, that is the exotic introduction. So these are the three programs the government of India have been adopted. And the next, only for this class, I have taken only few examples for the botanical garden success, that is Malheur lettuce. The collected stock was maintained. Reintroduction took place. In the first year, 40,000 seeds were produced. So it is very sensitive. That's why we have taken, that means it is a success story. That means now it is 40,000 seeds were preserved and then we can reintroduce. And the next example is Torrey pine. In 1991, 840 trees have died due to the IPS beetle. So 30,000 seeds from 149 trees were collected and preserved. Before the trees could be reintroduced, first we have to see that all the IPS beetles had to be exterminated. Then only reintroduction will be possible as well as successful. Some of the methods of the biodiversity conservation are, other than zoo as well as the botanical gardens as well as aquaria, there are gene sanctuaries. Gene sanctuaries are nothing but national sanctuaries for seed bank as well as gene bank, and in vitro storage as well as pollen banks. These are the some of the preservation techniques, preservation areas for the biodiversity conservation. The scientific methods of biodiversity conservation, we will first look into the seed bank. In this picture, the collection of seeds we are seeing, the storage of seeds we are seeing. The germplasm is conserved in the form of seed. That means the germplasm, which is a live part of the seed, is present inside and convenient for storage. Only orthodox species can be conserved. Orthodox species are nothing but desiccated tolerant. That means they are tolerant for desiccation method. Three types of conservation methods are there. One is the short term method, medium term method as well as long term conservation procedures. Depends upon the nature of the seed, we have to select which method is suitable for that particular species. And some of the advantages of the seed bank are, large number of samples can be conserved and handling is easy. Under pathogen as well as insect free environment we can conserve. Whereas some of the disadvantages are also there. That is, recalcitrant species cannot be stored. They are not desiccated tolerant. That means they are desiccated sensitive. And failure for power supply may lead to loss of viability and germplasm. That is one of the biggest limitation in the seed bank operation. Requires periodical evaluation and as well as the multiplication is essential for the seed bank. And what are the procedures in the seed bank conservation? So for the preserving purpose, these are the four processes involved. First one is cleaning. Cleaning, we all know that we can collect the seed normally in a clean state, but sometimes occasionally clean seed will be collected, and more often seed is collected still in its fruit. But the only precaution we have to see is the seed must be taken from the fruit undamaged. This reduced bulk as well as the disease risk. The second method is X-ray analysis. From the collected seeds, few seeds are taken and X-rayed. This is done to see how many of the samples are empty seeds and find any insect larvae hiding in the seeds. That is most important before preserving. The X-rayed seeds are normally thrown away afterwards because they are genetically damaged. Once it has gone under the X-ray analysis, they genetically damaged. The other process is drying, storage as well as packaging. Drying and freezing the seed increases the time that the seed will last for long. Seeds are dried in cool condition between 15 to 18 degrees centigrade we have to maintain with the relevant humidity of 11 to 15%. Almost it takes a 1 month. The seed is then put into an airtight container and kept at minus 20 degrees centigrade. A few seeds are viable for the germination monitoring. In germination monitoring, normally the collected seeds have been preserved in the frozen zoos, and then we can maintain that whether it is germinating or not. Sometimes it happens that some seeds after monitoring may be dormant or inert or died. So, that management also we can clearly see before conservation. And second method is gene bank, that is germplasm banks. Gene banks are like seed banks, mainly for long lived perennials, recalcitrant and vegetative propagated species. They are accessible for research, and germplasm can be conserved in living state. Eggs, sperm and embryos are cryogenically frozen. That means under certain temperatures, maximum that is minus 10 to 12 degrees centigrade, to protect the genetic variation of the species undamaged. Germplasms are stored in the form of seeds, pollens, in vitro cultures as well as the microbial cultures also, plant tissues also. The Zoological Society of San Diego has developed a frozen zoo in collaboration with India, where we have seen that macaw case. And the gene banks, the advantages of gene banks, if you look into the advantages, provides opportunities for continuous evaluation for various economic characters and directly utilized in the breeding programs. Some disadvantages are also there. They cannot cover entire genetic diversity. Exposed to pathogen and insects is also a threat, and it is an highly expensive method. And some other methods we will see, that is in vitro conservation. That means storage in laboratory conditions for the long term conservation, stored at low temperatures under slow growth condition, and special equipment, techniques and trained manpower is highly required for this in vitro conservation. And next is the pollen banks, useful for base collections of species which do not produce orthodox seeds. We have already learnt about orthodox nature. Requires small space but chances to lose cytoplasmic genes. So, one has to be taken care while preserving or conserving the pollens, as well as desiccation, tolerant and intolerant types of pollens are there. So, in that case also we have to taken care before preservation. The other one is DNA banks. Large quantities of genetic resources can be stored quickly at low cost, used in molecular, phylogenetic and systematics of extinct taxa and genes, used for bioprospecting and assessment of biodiversity studies. Genetic material can be introduced to other genotypes for plant breeding and enhancement purposes. The details of the DNA, pollen as well as seed banks we can study in the next class. The ex situ contribution to the biodiversity. Before concluding, we have to understand what are the positive contributions of ex situ conservation methodology. It is indirectly contribute to in situ conservation through probable education and awareness, and it increases interest in saving species endangered with extinction, and it is an good example for the animal ambassadors. Zoos directly contribute yearly to research and conservation of wild populations as well. botanical gardens, they also help in ethnobiology strengthening collections that have traditional and cultural implications. Reintroductions have occurred for at least 120 animal species, and 15 of these are definitely established in the wild and have self-sufficient populations. So, these are the success stories of the ex situ conservation. But some problems of ex situ conservation are also there. They are extremely expensive. We all know that because all the preservation techniques are highly expensive and long lasting as well as difficult to maintain. Can endanger remaining wild population also. So, before doing that, we have to take proper precautions for the conservation, and welfare implications are also there, and it detracts attention from in situ conservation, the other conservation methodology, and not conserving interactions. So, we have to taken care of these. And some others are genetic and disease problems, that is inbreeding as well as selection for captive environment are the main problems of the genetic issues, and some of them will lose their behavioral aspects also. And international regulations on animal movement re-establishment can be problematic. So, we cannot move an animal as our wish. So, before doing that, we have to follow some of the rules of the government. And to conclude this session, I would like to give a quotation by the famous environmentalist Leopold, that is, harmony with the land is like harmony with a friend. You cannot cherish his right hand and chop off his left. The land is one organism. Its parts compete with each other and cooperate with each other. To keep every cog and wheel is the first precaution of intelligent tinkering. Thank you.